Good morning and welcome to Worcester Business Journal's Forum on Crisis Management, Adapting and Reinventing Your Business. I'm Chris Prosser, the Events Manager at the Worcester Business Journal, and shortly Brad Kane, our editor, will be joining us. I am joined by a panel of business owners and CEOs who are going to share how they shifted their focus, re-examining their customer and employee needs, and offered new services or products to meet demand during this pandemic. And hopefully you will take away some strategies and best practices for survival and success in this changed marketplace. This special session is brought to you by the support of our friends at Middlesex Savings Bank. Middlesex Savings Bank is one of the largest mutual savings banks in the country and has been serving businesses in our region for 185 years. We thank them for the support of these webcasts. On our panel today, we have joining us Lynn Shaney, who is owner of Maker Domain, a local market in downtown Worcester. Anthony D'Elia, who is the executive producer at Revelation, an audiovisual event and collaboration company in Worcester. James Donahue, who is president and CEO of Old Sturbridge Village, the largest outdoor history museum in the Northeast, located in Sturbridge. And Bruce Platzman, president and CEO of AIS, a leading manufacturer of commercial office furniture and seating located in Leominster. Before we jump into the panel discussion, just a couple of notes for the audience. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A box and we'll get to as many of your questions as possible during the discussion. Today's webcast is also being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to all of you after the event. Now, let's get started. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning, Chris.
So we're going to start off and ask you to give a brief overview of your business and how you were initially impacted by the coronavirus pandemic at the beginning and how you've pivoted some. We're going to start with Lynn and ask you to start the panel off.
Great. Thank you for having me this morning, Chris, and Worcester Business Journal. Good morning, everyone. February 21st, I opened my doors to Maker Domain. It's a local food market downtown, directly across from Mechanics Hall. For about 3 weeks, roughly, we were kind of working through some kinks with a scheduled grand ribbon cutting and grand opening scheduled for March 17th. As you know, March 17th was the day that Governor Baker shut down the state, essentially, and most businesses as we went through a quarantine. Maker Domain did not shut down. Instead, I had to essentially look at all of my staff that I had just hired or some that had been with me previously as Let Us Be Local, and make the hard decision of who could stay and who couldn't stay. That was the biggest impact for my business, is that essentially the majority of the women that I had working for me all had children in daycare, with the exception of one. So basically, my entire staff was now had to be laid off because they had no childcare situations, or their husbands or significant others, or a multitude of different challenges that they were working through occurred. And then from there, I had one girl who did not have children, but she was already out sick with the flu, not corona at that time. So it was me by myself for the first couple of about 10 days until I leaned on a chef and that asked him for help because he was now unemployed. So as a result, the next couple of months were really interesting. I used to refer to it as Solo Sunday because no one was aware of the fact that I was here by myself with a new program of launching an online ordering platform that was about 5 months premature. And it was a very interesting process, to say the least. And not to mention, no one knew that I existed down here on Main Street, and all of the foot traffic that we saw was essentially gone. And it was very spooky and eerie. There was no foot traffic. There was no one driving for months and months and months. And we're still here. We've been here every day. And luckily, I'm very thankful that I have all of these customers that still order online. And we did offer a safe place for many customers that were fearful to go inside a regular grocery store, not to mention that grocery stores in general had problems with their shelves being clean of all toilet paper and flour and just weird things that people needed or bought in ridiculous amounts. So I never ran out of those things, and we always had them on the shelves. We still have them on the shelf, and we're still providing a pretty unique opportunity to have all local food within one location, essentially an entire farmer's market in one location, right here on Main Street for our community.
Great, thanks, Lynn. We'll dig a little deeper into everything you went through as we get on through the panel discussion. Anthony, do you want to take the baton next and tell us a little bit about your business and what went on with you?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and grateful to be here. So I remember that when it all began, we were doing a large event down in Orlando. So it was the first week of March, and it was a 1,200 person large week-long conference. And that was really the start to our year because not many events happen in January and February. So it was really, you know, everybody preparing for that large event, and that was the kickoff to our year. And we were expecting to have, you know, our best year ever. We've been in business for 10 years now, and really getting to that point where really starting to, you know, probably turn some nice profit beyond just my own salary. And we were excited for 2020. Like I think many people and businesses were, just the whole idea of 2020. And then I remember as the event's going on during the week, starting to get the news. And then, you know, just the final day after we packed up and when everybody's ready to fly home and drive home, everyone just being like deflated and not knowing what was going to happen. And, you know, calls were already coming in, things were already being canceled. And I just remember this morbid, you know, kind of scene as we were all getting ready to fly out, not really knowing what we were flying home to and what was going to happen to all of our businesses and all of our jobs. And so it continued. We got home, and you know, cancellations kept on coming in every single week. So, you know, first it was the rest of the events for March and April, and then a couple of weeks later it was May's events and June's events. And, you know, before you knew it, as time went on, all events were canceled, and that was it. And you know, so we were hopeful that maybe things would come back in August. Maybe it was just going to be a few months. That didn't happen, and so on and so forth. And here we are today, still not having large events. It was tough. For all of our employees and everybody, we kept all of our full-time employees on. We paid them through March and April. We got the PPP loan, and that paid them for a couple of more months. And then by the time I think it was July, we had to start considering, you know, not layoffs. We went to a reduced time. So we went to a one day a week model just to kind of get us through. And now we're slowly building back up. So we're back to 2 days a week, 3 days a week for most of our employees. And we're doing our best to try to rebuild. But we have to do it without events. And without live events, that was our core business. It makes it very, very difficult. So what we have been doing is, you know, putting a focus on people, and, you know, our employees, you know, then our customers still have messages that need to be delivered. So we wanted to find an avenue for that. And so it's been a lot of things like this with the virtual. So we were in development of transforming our business a little bit and adding some new offerings. And that was one of those things, was going to be a studio. And we wanted to build this collaborative workspace for creative professionals, kind of like a WeWork co-op that they have in Boston and some other areas. And that was something that we were going to slowly build out over time with the profits from our events. We had to take a leap of faith, and we decided that we're going to go all in. We invested about $100,000 into building a soundproof studio with a control room. There's a large collaborative space, you know, TVs and different workstations everywhere. And we went all in. So when we didn't have any money coming in, we decided to put more money into it and, you know, try to reinvent ourselves. So now every single week we're doing live streams and virtual events out of our studio. And we're hoping to, you know, launch and officially open up the studio to the public in a safe way, however we can. And we have temperature scanners and we take all the protocols. So we're looking to open that up hopefully November. And we're going to continue doing virtual events. Well, they're not nearly as profitable, which is a big problem because we're not bringing in a ton of revenue. We're able to support the community and support these people that still have a message that they want to get out there. And we're going to maintain that and hope that we can pay some bills until live events come back.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. Again, everyone, this is Brad Kane from WBJ. Sorry for joining a little late. But moving right along, Jim, if you want to pick up with the same question.
Great. Thank you, Brad, for having me this morning, and thank you to the Worcester Business Journal. And at no other time in my lifetime has press and media been more important. So thank you guys for being there for everyone and for my colleagues on the panel. So as most people know, Old Sturbridge Village is a pretty large organization. And like Anthony, you know, January and February were kind of slow times for us. So March was really the kickoff of our year. And we were heading into it when the state was shut down due to the pandemic. And to put it in perspective, in any given spring, Old Sturbridge Village could see anywhere between 40 and 50,000 students coming from schools. We will see during the course of an entire year about 250,000 visitors. We'll have 60 to 70 weddings take place here at the museum. We have a hotel that's usually busy, particularly from April school vacation week through the summer as families are traveling. And we rely heavily on tourism, right? So many of our visitors, especially during the summertime, are coming from outside of New England, in some cases outside of the country. So when the pandemic hit, you know, my first reaction was to say, well, this can't be long-term, right? We're not going to be in this for a long time. So when we shut everything down, one of the things that I thought was most important was to keep everybody calm, to steady the ship, because there was so much uncertainty about this virus, how you got it, how serious it was, how long the shutdown was going to take place. So we moved into over-communication mode right away. So the day that we shut the village down, which I think was the Saturday before St. Patrick's Day, we started to have daily senior management team calls at 9 o'clock in the morning, where we brought everybody, about 20 of us came together, shared information. We told our staff and our boards that, look, you know, in the absence of a lot of definitive information, we're going to take this crisis in 2-week chunks. So we're not going to make too many long-term decisions. We're just going to see what each 2-week chunk brings. And then I remember after about maybe 10 days of this, 15 days of this, sitting, watching a press conference and thinking to myself, okay, nobody knows where this is going. So we reconvened the senior management team and I said, look, we have to be planning for the worst at this point. We have to imagine that we're in full shutdown mode, at least through the end of the summer, if not through the fall, and we have to have a plan for that. So we got our heads together, developed a plan, set some strategic priorities for the organization, just like we would do during ordinary times. And I can talk a little bit about those later. And then kept everybody in remote. We employ, in all of our organizations combined, about 200 people in various capacities. So we have folks working in our agriculture program on the farm, which is a 7-day-a-week operation, folks working in housekeeping, folks working as educators. So we wanted to make sure that everybody was safe. So we put most of our staff into remote work mode pretty much immediately, and we kept a core group of essential staff here working consistently with the safety protocols that were provided by the state. So the good news on this, and I'll talk a little bit more about how we got here later in the webinar, is that on July 1st, we were able to reopen to the public. We brought our staff back in phases in the month of June. We asked them to reimagine the museum experience, leveraging our outdoor campus as our primary resource for that. And I'm happy to report that over Columbus Day weekend, we actually saw our highest visitation since we reopened in July. And we're coming in closer to about 50% of where we would be on a normal weekend, up from about 30% when we opened in July 1st. So it's moving in the right direction. I know there are lots of questions to come in this discussion, so I'll stop there and turn it back to you, Brad.
Well, good, thank you, Jim. And yes, we have plenty of robust questions coming up. But and of course, last but not least, Bruce of AIS. If you wanted to talk about a little bit how you guys were initially impacted and what you did from there.
Great. Thank you very much for having me today and kind of sharing what we've been doing through the last 6 to 8 months and some of the challenges that we've had. First of all, we're an office furniture manufacturer. We make everything for an office, whether it's traditional panel systems, collaborative furniture, which certainly is not in right now, open workstations. We'll talk a little bit later about different office layouts and some of the things we're seeing and experiencing. But everything you would need from an office, we do manufacture in Leominster, Mass. We have 800 manufacturing employees in our facility, and happy to say that we haven't laid off any of our manufacturing people to date. But some of the challenges that we encountered right off the bat on March 17th, when the governor did close down the state except for essential businesses, I called my executive team together and we said, well, let's start planning for the shutdown and what does that look like? And like Jim, we thought this would be short term, maybe 2 to 4 weeks, and we'd get on with it. But as we started to talk about it, somebody brought up the fact that we're supplying furniture for Brigham and Women's. We had 2 orders in-house for Homeland Security. We had some other Lockheed Martin, places like that, our facilities like that. And we were doing some triage centers that were handling nothing but COVID patients. So we felt it was important to get before the Governor's Council that was determining essential, non-essential. And on March 18th, we were deemed an essential business within 1 hour of our presentation to the Governor's office. And so fortunately for our organization, we've been able to stay open. So the biggest concern we had since day one was what was that going to mean for business and our employees? So the first thing that we prioritized was the safety of our employees. How are we going to keep our 800 employees safe? I know we'll get into some of those policies and what we actually did a little later on in this discussion. But once we got our facility with what we call safe, we increased our air ventilation, different things. We had to get them comfortable that it was okay to come back in here and work, and we were going to do everything within our power to make sure that they were safe. But then again, evaluating the loss of business and the potential loss of business. In other words, were customers going to be canceling orders? Were all future projects going to be put on hold? Was commercial real estate going to just completely stall out? And those are some of the concerns and some of the things we've done. So we have, and really what we'll be talking about later today, we have reinvented ourselves from the standpoint of different products and solutions, and we've become sort of consultative with potential customers and existing customers and what the future office space will look like. I know Brad wants to have me talk a little bit about that further on in the discussion.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Next question, again, I'll throw it out to everyone, but Jim, you kind of alluded to it first. I think once everyone realized that, your revenues were going to be probably severely impacted, some more than others, you did have to come up with priorities for the organization. And I know Old Sturbridge Village, you actually had a very set of priorities. So again, Jim, if you can start with that, and then we'll kind of move on to everyone of, when everything was stripped away, what did you prioritize in that beginning?
Yeah, no, Brad, it's a great question because, as you know, when a crisis like this hits, especially something so unexpected and unprecedented, we had nothing to fall back on in terms of our own track record of dealing with something like this. And when you're a large, complex organization like the Village, you've got lots of moving parts, lots of questions. And so it became really clear to me that for us to make the best decisions we could during this crisis, we had to have some very clear strategic priorities for the organization. And so I went to the management team and to the board and said, here are the 3 things that we have to stay focused on. And every decision that we make during this crisis should line up with one of these 3 priorities. The first, of course, is an easy one. I think Bruce referenced it. It's I needed to make sure that all of our employees, all of our visitors, if and when they returned, and all of the students that we serve at the charter school that Old Sturbridge Village runs, were safe and were healthy. So that was our top priority. Our second priority was to make sure that all of our employees maintained their livelihoods. By livelihoods, Brad, I mean salary and health insurance. I didn't want this pandemic to result in an economic impact to our staff, right? So I wanted to make sure that I could preserve everybody's livelihood. And then the third priority, which seems a little bit like the second, but it is different, is that I wanted to preserve jobs for when the pandemic was over. And there were a couple of reasons for that. You know, one, like Anthony had said, we had a great 2019. We were really well positioned for 2020. I can empathize with Lynn, right? You're ready to start, you're ready to go. And then all of a sudden this thing comes out of nowhere and brings you to your knees. So I didn't want people losing their jobs. They had been working so hard to get to 2020 that I didn't want those positions to go away. And then quite frankly, from a business perspective, if you've been to Old Sturbridge Village, you know from walking around that we have people doing things here that you don't see anywhere else really. So we've invested a lot in training our blacksmiths. We've invested a lot in training our farmers. We've invested a lot in training our historians. These are not folks who can easily find jobs somewhere else. If they lose a job here at the museum, it's not like everyone's hiring a blacksmith. Nor is it going to be easy for us to hire these people. If we lose staff during a pandemic, it would be very costly for us to have to train that number of professionals to bring the museum back. So it was critical, I think, that we kept everybody safe and healthy, that we kept everybody's livelihood whole, and then that we kept and preserved jobs. And I'm happy to report that for the most part, we've been able to do that so far in the pandemic.
All right, Bruce, I'll throw the same question to you. You know, when everything got stripped away, particularly at the start of the pandemic, what did you prioritize for your organization?
You know, as I mentioned earlier, safety was number one, and really protecting the jobs of 800 people. I mean, most of the people here have been here many years. They're manufacturing jobs, which we all know in this state are tough to come by. And that was our number one goal. Could we maintain the level of employment? Could we keep people safe and even make them feel comfortable that it was safe to come back to work? And it wasn't easy. One of the things we did to help ease them back in, as well as all the safety protocols we did, was we instituted hazard pay immediately. And for anybody that worked a 40-hour week, we gave them an extra $150 per week. And that certainly helped, not give people necessarily the confidence, but we wanted to help their families and get through this crisis, because it certainly wasn't easy. The other thing that we did was we saw the pain and suffering in Central Mass, and really throughout the world, but we were really focused on Central Mass. Sorry about that. Okay. And what we wanted to do was give back to the community. In other words, what could we do to help in the Leominster area in Fitchburg? There's a hospital here, there's an emergency center, there's homeless shelters, there's food banks, things like that. And we immediately instituted a program called, really copied after Rosie the Riveter in World War II. We started making masks within our seating line. We actually closed down one of our seating production lines and started manufacturing masks, first for our own use, to protect our employees, and then to the police and fire departments of Leominster, and then UMass, both in Leominster and in Worcester as well. And from there, it really mushroomed to the standpoint where today we've given out over 250,000 masks around the country to people that are really in need. And these are high quality, reusable, washable masks treated with nanotechnology and micro fabrics as well. And it's something we're pretty proud of, and our employees are pretty excited. We think that it really helps morale when you can give back to the community and not just write a check, but actually do something where your employees go out and become very hands-on. So that became an important initiative. It has nothing to do with us making furniture. It just has everything to do with, how can we help the community? Because we were so grateful that we were able to stay open. And I know there were so many companies that were not in the position we were. So giving back really became important for us.
All right, and then Lynn, I'll throw the same question to you. I know Maker to Maine was in a much different situation. So on the day you were hoping to have your ribbon cutting, you're having a much different discussion. What were your priorities, your core priorities at that moment?
We had actually seen what was transpiring a few weeks prior, and we're preparing for the fact that the pandemic was, obviously coming to the States and specifically to Massachusetts. So as a result, I started thinking about my business is double faceted. So people know me from Let Us Be Local. Let Us Be Local evolved into Maker Domain. So the wholesale operation of what I've done for the last 8 years of aggregation of food to farms and farm-to-farm aggregation and to restaurants and breweries and schools and so forth, that still needed to exist within Maker Domain space. And oddly enough, somehow it still has. Not very well, but it still has over the last couple of months. But my first priority was, I remember after Baker's press conference on March 15th, looking at my boyfriend, who is in the restaurant industry and owns BT Smokehouse with fried chicken. He mentioned specifically, this is going to impact the entire wholesale business and everyone's going to be shut down. So my first priority is I have a driver who is solely to deliver product from farms to restaurants and how that's going to impact her. So I sat my whole staff down and just said, my number one priority is, what do you need to do? Because I had mentioned earlier that a lot of my staff had children, and if they now needed to be home with them because their kids were no longer going to be in school and remote learning, or they had one in particular had a grandmother who was her primary childcare service, and I was like, well, you cannot take the chance of being in my store, you getting sick, and then transferring that to your child who could impact your grandmother. So I just thought about that whole process of how this would impact them. But then more importantly, after that fact, and I was pretty much the only person in the store for a couple weeks working solo for 7 days a week. And most people are unaware of the fact that happened. I made sure that the wholesale business, I could offer as much as possible by them coming to the store to pick up their product and still ordering delivery and ordering from me, but that I couldn't deliver to them because I no longer had a driver at that point. So those were like the two priorities, is making sure that I offered a safe scenario for my customers that wanted a place that was smaller, more intimate, that we were disinfecting every single thing, because at that point smudge was a real concern that it could be transferred through contact of surfaces, and disinfecting every single item and going through that process and making sure that we're following strict guidelines within the Board of Health requirements, and not accepting cash for a little while. That was detrimental, especially because we're in an area where a lot of people in our community, their sole means is to pay for things in cash. So that was a whole other slew of challenges, but banks weren't open. So I had no way to get change. It was just utter chaos, literally, for a couple weeks, and trying to figure out and navigate all of those things. But I never changed the thought process that the number one priority was to make sure that my staff could still somehow stay employed with me if possible. One person in particular, she would come in the middle of the night and stock shelves and take social media pictures and just upload product and do anything she possibly could in the middle of the night, because she had 3 kids under the age of 5 years old at home, and her husband is a full-time farmer. And it was just, that was the most important priority to me, no matter what. I think the relationships you build and the people you have in your business say everything. They're the most important priority, regardless.
Well, thank you, Lynn. And then Anthony, same question to you. What were the priorities in that very difficult time?
Absolutely. I think just like all the other panelists, it was about our employees. So number one, first most, how can we maintain, our employees and keep them on, even though no events are going to happen. So the safety of our employees and the ability for our employees to be paid and to earn a living and to keep their health insurance and their benefits. So still to this day, none of our full-time employees have lost their benefits, and they still, that's one of the reasons why we kept them on 1 day a week and we didn't go to a full layoff. And, that was the absolute number one priority. And I was really moved by one employee that when we did step down to the 1 day a week, he actually came and he said, look, I can get my job back as a welder. I want to do that so that these guys can have the benefits, and maybe one of the other employees can work 2 days a week because I can go work over here. I don't want to collect. I don't want to be unemployed. I would rather do that until things come back. And just blown away by him looking out for his fellow employees, for his colleagues, and just the fact that he didn't want to collect, that he wanted to continue working when things got really bad. And very impressed, and looking forward to hopefully bringing him back when we can. But, you know, really it's all about people, and that was our number one priority. And then after our employees, knowing that, you know, we had a plan for them, it evolved, but we continued to take care of them. The second thing was our customers and our community. They still have messages that they need to get out. And I think one of the biggest ones that stands out was all of the graduates. So all of these students that were graduating and how they weren't going to have a commencement, you know, how can we assist them? So one way that we helped was we lowered the price of our LED wall. So we have a large outdoor LED wall that's in a trailer that can be up in minutes. And we took that from $6,500 a day and we lowered that price. We basically cut it in half down to $3,500 to cover our expenses. And we even donated it to a couple of schools. So Doherty and Worcester, and then also Shrewsbury, because I'm a resident of Shrewsbury. We donated to honor some of their graduates. You know, Wachusett utilized it in the center of their common. And it was a really nice way to recognize the students. And that was our focus. It wasn't, as soon as it happened, it wasn't about how can we profit. It was more about how can we cover the expenses of doing some of these virtual events, or, you know, setting up this LED wall and still get it out in the community and use, because the last thing we want is $1 million worth of equipment sitting in a warehouse not doing anything. If we can go out there and it can impact people and we can cover our expenses, and that's the best we want to do. And then in some cases, we didn't even cover our expenses. We just, we donated it because it was the right thing to do, and we just wanted to support the community. So absolutely, number one was our own employees, and then number two, how can we support the community? Profit was, it hasn't been a thought for this entire year.
Thank you, Anthony. And I know there's certain things we definitely want to get in touch with, but we did get a question from an audience member right at registration that I wanted to make sure we touched on now. And it's kind of geared towards small business. So Lynn and Anthony, I'll throw it out to you first. But can you suggest techniques that would scale down for small mom and pop ventures, since small businesses who have been most severely stricken by COVID-19's financial fallout? Again, kind of businesses like yours that probably have smaller margins and maybe a little less cash on hand. And you know, what would you say to those people that are in that boat? Anthony, I think you just finished, but we'll throw it back to you, and then maybe Lynn next, and then Jim and Bruce, if you want to jump in.
Sure. I think I would have to say to get creative, come up with new ideas for new revenue streams. You know, like we push forward with the collaborative workspace and going virtual. You know, we had to sell off a whole bunch of equipment that we know that we wouldn't be using, and purchase equipment that was, you know, smaller, that was more for that environment, that was going to execute what we needed to do for virtual events. So really making that pivot and saying, this isn't happening over here. What else can I do to, you know, generate some revenue? How else can I support the community in a different way? We also started selling temperature scanners, because it is a piece of technology. So the same company that manufactures all the big LED walls that we use, they had some temperature scanners that you could walk up to and scan your face. It would detect if you wore a mask or not. So we started selling those, and we installed those in some schools, and they've been very effective for them. And then we put a larger focus on integration. Our absolute number one focus was large events. Now we've pivoted, and we're helping a lot of churches with very simple little things, setting them up with a $2,000 package that will give them ability to stream out to their congregation. So, you know, that's a whole new thing that nobody was really thinking of. So just going from our large scale integration business to, you know, this is something small that we can do, but we can do a whole bunch of them because there's a ton of churches that need that. Everybody needs to get their message delivered. So it's really about that pivot. It's okay, this doesn't exist anymore. What does exist? What is a need? And find that need and try to fill it.
Thank you, Anthony. And then Lynn, jump in. What does small business focus on?
So I would agree. The first thing you said is how margins are really small. So that in itself, and figuring out what you can do that doesn't cost an additional expense to you, or an absorbent amount of money. So how Anthony was mentioning that he sold equipment to get new equipment that was more relevant for what you needed to do. I would say that's the biggest thing as far as looking at. Listen, we're not going back, right? Where everyone's like, when it returns to normal, there's no such thing. We're in this for a long time. We haven't seen really the aftermath of what's going to continue to transpire and the fallout of what we've just gone through. It's going to continue, and unfortunately, where we go through daylight savings time and it's going to get dark at 4:30, New Englanders are naturally want to hibernate at 4:30 in the evening, and then not really think much about going out or venturing out and so forth. And so coupled with obviously an ongoing pandemic, you have to find a way to kind of tap into an online presence. So if you're not already doing that, if you're not already in social media, if you're not already have ventured into targeting your customers online, now is the opportunity to do that, because everything we know is essentially online. We're doing that right now. We're having a virtual conversation that is the best way to target your customers, because although you'll still see a little foot traffic of things coming through the door, you've got to find a way to get creative and really tap into people that are on their phones and their, and their desktops and so forth, because that's the world we're living in right now, even more so than we were 6 months, 7 months ago.
And then touching on, kind of follow up on that a little bit, I think we're all kind of looking forward, and even though 2021 is still in uncertainty, you still have to plan for your business. Bruce, I think maybe, I don't know if you have necessarily the most uncertainty, but certainly no one knows what's going to be with the office market and, people working from home and everything else. So you guys are obviously very geared towards having businesses and offices. So maybe just not necessarily talking about the outlook for your business, but just moving forward, like what do you see for AIS in 2021 and, sort of the market that you operate in?
Well, first of all, the office, as we've all known it, is never going to return. Especially, we've been very involved, and our industry has been involved over the last few years of really capitalizing on collaborative environments, which in the world of furniture means that there are really no panels, or if there are panels, they're very low, and it really promotes collaboration within the office area. And that's been the trend. Well, that's probably the worst layout you can possibly have during a COVID or a pandemic. And then moving forward post-COVID, I think that, people are going to be a little hesitant to go back towards those types of environments. So we've had to become, shift a little bit. We sell thousands of tempered glass, as well as plexiglass and Lexian screens on a weekly basis to help promote office areas that still do not go back to the cubicle farms that we knew for 25 to 30 years. I don't think anybody wants to go back to that environment. But at the same time, we need to create social distancing within the office area and which creates obviously some safety protocols. But at least glass opens up the office area, it keeps people safe, and so we can move in those different directions. Some of the things that are going to impact office space and certainly our industry and AIS in particular is this work from home environment that you talk about, Brad, and where does that go? And I think it's going to be like our schools. It's going to be somewhat of a hybrid. I don't think that companies moving forward are going to allow it 100% of the time. And I don't think they're going to demand that everybody come back 100% of the time. And, here are some of the things I see as issues, and I've actually been speaking and consulting with many different industries and companies on this subject. And, I don't believe that anybody working from home is as productive. I think I'm pretty good at it, and I know that there are still distractions that occur at home. So it's tough to be as productive working from home 100% of the time. The other thing too is you look at any young individual that's hired out of school, and if you talk to them a few years later, if they've been what you would consider a successful employee that's really grown within an organization, they'll usually talk about the training that they got early on in a mentoring program. They hooked onto some older employee, someone that had been with the organization or in the industry many years. Well, if we're all working from home, training suffering, mentoring suffering, and I talked about productivity, but one of the other big things is every one of us on this call has a corporate culture, all very different. It's what defines a company, your success. People will usually talk about that culture and why you're different and how you compete. Well, it's very difficult to develop and nurture corporate culture when everybody's working from home. So I believe in what I just said, but I'm also, because I'm in the office furniture business, hope that what I said is accurate. And I think that you're going to see people coming back to work as we get the vaccine distributed, hopefully early 2021, and get it in the hands of, the entire population of the United States and the world.
Yes, thank you, Bruce. Certainly there's a different dynamic from working from home. So I can certainly attest. I think most people can. So Jim, obviously you're not in the office furniture business, but things are drastically changing for Old Sturbridge Village and everything else. So, what do you envision kind of moving forward, and how are you changing or not changing?
So, I mean, it's a great question, Brad. And I agree with a lot of what Bruce said. Actually, we're in the antique furniture business, so we do have some antique furniture at the museum. But, the way we've been operating is just making the assumption that this could be our now normal for the foreseeable future, and we have to make sure that we can be sustainable. The good news is that because our museum is fairly decentralized and we have several buildings and lots of offices, we have actually been able to bring most of our staff back full-time in person. So there have been some adjustments with that in terms of our ability to have large staff meetings in the same space. We're doing certainly a lot more online, but I agree completely with Bruce that preserving the culture of the organization, to do that really well, we really have to kind of be in person. And to make that happen, obviously as school was opening up in September, we had employees, not just at our Old Sturbridge Academy, which we run up the street, but also here at Old Sturbridge Village, who were very anxious about what it was going to mean for them to be back at work full time and having their children in a hybrid or a remote learning environment where they were going to be home all day long, they didn't have a childcare solution, or they had elderly in-laws who could not babysit the kids. So because our Museum Education Center is empty in the absence of school field trips, we converted that into what we're calling a one-room schoolhouse for the children of employees of both Old Sturbridge Village and Old Sturbridge Academy, so that employees can come to work, drop their kids at the one-room schoolhouse. It's staffed by our museum education staff. They are in touch with each child's school, so they understand what the remote learning curriculum is. And then the children of our employees, we have about 20 to 25 up there on any given day, can actually go into a safe school-like setting. They can get support for their curriculum, and then they can also go outside and enjoy the outdoors of Old Sturbridge Village and have kind of a normal school life. And the anxiety levels for our staff as we approached the reopening of school went down significantly. And so we've had every staff member has been able to return. And I actually had an employee, reminded by Anthony's story, who came up to me in tears after we made this announcement saying, my husband or I, one of us was going to have to quit our job to be able to stay home and take care of our kids, and we don't have to do that now. Going forward, I think that there are three strategies we're pursuing right now for sustainability, assuming that the pandemic continues for the next 12 to 24 months and its impact. One is to continue to leverage the outdoor resources of the museum and develop reimagined experiences that visitors can enjoy, mostly outside. And so we've been working on that, piloting new programs. I've said to my program staff, look, if there was ever a year to experiment and try something new and not be afraid to fail, this is the year to do it, because everything's caving in. So you've got nothing to lose. And so the staff has been doing that, which has been great. And they've come up with some pretty successful programs, including a Halloween one that will launch in about a week. And then in January, we actually took over the operation of a small outdoor history museum down in Bristol, Rhode Island. It's about 50 acres compared to the 200 acres here at the village. It has a few buildings. It was really struggling to kind of sustain itself. Small museums face different challenges than larger ones. So we entered into an agreement with them where we're managing them. And I believe that that partnership probably saved that museum in the face of COVID when the pandemic hit in March. So we're able to move staff back and forth between both organizations. We manage all the accounting and finance. We were able to deploy some of our PPP resources down to that museum to keep staff employed down there. So I see that as potentially part of the COVID future for smaller organizations. To your earlier question about small business, there are small museums that are struggling. It wouldn't surprise me if Old Sturbridge Village partnered with some additional museums to keep them going. And then I think one thing that's shocked me is that the charter school, though it had its own challenges because of the pandemic and continues to have them, was relatively unaffected in terms of its financial performance. The kids are up at school now. We've had to make some changes to the delivery model to accomplish social distancing. So I can envision that there may be other Old Sturbridge academies that may open up, not just in Massachusetts, possibly in other New England states, to kind of support that side of the business. So, I think, and Bruce said it well earlier, you have to create opportunities, not just for your business, but for your community. And I think the pandemic has definitely given us both opportunities on both sides.
And then kind of jumping on that thought with Anthony, looking at 2021 and the future, I know events business might be in the most turmoil right now. And you've already touched a little bit on the things you're doing, like, having temperature scanners for when, events may eventually go large scale and things like that, which I think will be important. But maybe I wanted to expand a little bit on something you mentioned at your intro, which was, spending that $100,000 to sort of create that, what do you call it, a co-working space or sort of a WeWork space for creatives. And I guess just looking forward, why do you think that will be important, not only to your business, but to the creative industry?
Sure. I think right now, a lot of photographers, videographers, maybe some web designers, those people in the creative professions that, I've seen a lot of them that moved out of their houses and they opened up offices. And, now I feel like some of those smaller, offices are going to have to close because of revenue. But I feel like if we can create this environment that, if they need to meet with a client, if they need to do a shoot in the studio, they have all those resources there. But I think what makes it really unique is they can come in and they can collaborate with each other. So now a photographer, might need to shoot video for a client and they can come down and they can meet with a videographer. And then at the same time, they have the resources of all of the equipment that we used to use on events and all of the new equipment that we've purchased. So if they need to utilize some cameras, some certain lighting, green screens, whatever it might be, all of those resources are right there. And they can do so, in that safe environment. Along with the temperature scanners, we're also doing disinfectant units. So UV light units are another thing that we're reselling that are becoming more and more popular. And I think are going to translate into the events. I think that these temperature scanners, these large scale disinfectant UV lights could be something that could be utilized prior to an event or after an event. Let's disinfect the space. Taking those temperatures as people are going into the event, we want to create those safe environments. So they've been working well for some of the installs that we're doing. And I think that, it's going to translate into events coming back. But we're really excited about the collaborative space and giving people a home and a place to connect with each other in a safe environment.
Well, that sounds wonderful, Anthony. So I know we're getting a little bit towards the end here. I think we got just over 5 minutes left. I might push us a little bit into overtime just because we did get a couple of questions from the audience. One that Lynn, I think you're kind of next up, so I'll throw it out to you and put you on this spot. But this one, particularly from Rita de Oliveira, I operate English for Industry, LLC, offering on-site English instruction customized for individual industries. She's mostly curious about how she stays front of mind with CEOs when language training might not be the highest priority on people's minds right now. So Lynn, how do you, maybe not quite the same for you, but I think a lot of what you do, how do you stay front of mind with everyone with sort of your mission?
Honestly, trends, stay relevant, right? So I'm in a local food scenario where where people were fearful of going into grocery stores. So they, and a really amazing thing happened where they decided to go and get their food direct from local farms, which I have been trying to get people to do that for like most of my life. And that finally transpired. And now we're habitual, right? So things started to transcend and people made this big dynamic shift in the spring towards sourcing their food locally. And then they went to, when we got to summer, and then people just kind of realized smudge wasn't as much of a thing. They became a little more complacent. And so all of those things become relevant in every aspect, regardless of what you do for work. And so when people became complacent about trying to figure out, okay, well, we can't fly for vacation, but we're going to still fit the family in an RV and we're going to go camp in Maine for a week, or we're going to rent a place on a lake and, meet up some other people that we think our families, or we always spend it with, 18 different families. Let's only spend it with one family. People became complacent and realizing that they can still do these things to a certain extent. So I think being aware of that and being aware of how people were trying to make their lives seem somewhat normal in a very abnormal environment, an abnormal situation that we're all going through, is something that has to stay in your mind. So if your industry is that you're trying to, regardless of what you're trying to operate and teach teach English and so forth, it doesn't matter the industry. Every single industry has to try and tap into what people are going through right now, what people are you're trying to juggle, children at home, you're trying to juggle working from home or this hybrid model, or all of these things in between. So keeping that relevant in your mind and figuring out what is relevant to your customer base it's like sales 101. It's how to get in and tap into that scenario, and understanding your customer first is how you stay relevant regardless of what industry you're in. So I would say in my case, people eat, right? We all have to eat. So if people enjoy eating local food and they want to be part of a community, that's what I offer here. But not to mention the restaurants that I work with, where so many of them are still on a hybrid takeout scenario, or trying to navigate, maybe they're navigating outside dining, which is about to change drastically because it's going to get very cold very quickly, and how that's going to set us up for the next 6 months, essentially, right? New Englanders, we have 6 months of winter. Let's be real. We have 4th of July, construction season, and winter. Those are our seasons here, essentially. So what we get accustomed to, and what we're about to go through for the next 6 months is going to be somewhat similar in the sense of what we just came through for the last 6 months, because of how we've pretty much been confined to our homes for most of that time period. So staying relevant and current with your customer is the most important takeaway, I would say.
All right, Jim, same question to you, much different industry, but how do you stay relevant in your customers' minds?
Yeah, so I think there are two issues, Brad, and I just want to come back to something that Lynn referenced earlier, and I thought she was right on the money with it, which is really not pulling back from and possibly even increasing your investment in your digital media strategy, your public relations, your outreach. I think there's a tendency when crises like these hit to pull back on those resources, to cut that spending. We've actually leaned into that this year for the Village, because we felt that it was more important than ever. There's a lot of noise right now out there. Customers are getting a lot of information at them. So we need to be really digitally present. We need to be working with our media companies. So I would be of the mindset of increasing your advertising spend. If you have any money to put behind advertising and PR, now would be the time to do it. And then at the Village, we are always, Brad, wrestling with this question of relevance, right? I mean, we interpret New England from the 1830s. That doesn't really change. So what we have to do is figure out, right, how do we change the delivery model? How do we hook the customer in? So the Halloween program I just referenced, it's coming up toward the second half of October is an example of that. You know, how do we bring new experiences to the campus to get people who might not have been here to come to the museum in the current reality, right? So that they feel safe, so that they feel that they're not at risk, so that they feel like they're getting a value. I think that was referenced earlier. Anthony talked about dropping the price of something. That's absolutely key, having that kind of price flexibility, so that you can appeal to people who might be in a different financial situation now than they may have been in 6 months from now. So, but the one thing I would say that absolutely makes a difference now is investing in media relations, investing in your digital presence. That would be key.
All right, and next, Bruce, I'd really be interested to hear what you have to say on this one as well. Obviously, you already talked at the beginning of the pandemic how you made your company, relevant to what was going on, but, as everything adjusts in the future, how do you stay relevant, again, with all your customers?
I mean, I agree with, pretty much what everybody said, but it's being consultative. It's realizing what, in our case, all of our customers are going through as they look at their space needs, both existing and future, and the unknown, because obviously, and someone said it earlier, nobody knows where this is, when it's going to stop, number one, and what the world's going to look like when it finally does stop. And so in some ways, we're shooting at a moving target, which is never a good thing in business. But we are sitting down and we're hearing a lot of the same concerns with every corporation. So whether it's, we have increased our digital presence, we've increased our marketing budget. So we're moving forward in those things. And I agree totally with you, Jim, that it's not a time to pull back in those areas. It's a time to actually increase your exposure, but not portray or have your salespeople go out there just trying to sell a product in business as usual. It's how can we help you understand what your office space is going to look like in the future, and how can we help you make your customers and your employees feel safe when they enter your facility, and how can we help you in that area?
Thank you. And then Anthony, same question, staying relevant with everyone. I know you've pivoted quite a few different ways, but just throwing it out there, what are you doing over at Revelation?
I think like Bruce just finished, I mean, it's all about people. I think, our products and our services have been pushed aside, and became more, how can we help people, which I think is a great thing. And that's a positive thing that can come out of this whole pandemic. Maybe we can get back to the roots and, serve our community better and, provide customers things that they really need, as opposed to, just shoving our product or our service and just trying to upsell. It's going to be, can I really sit back, listen to my client, find out what they really truly need and deliver that to them. So, just to continue to listen to our customers and to the community, and see what the needs are, and then eventually, if we take care of our community, we take care of people, it will lead to those profits once again, and develop our business.
All right, everyone, we are at 10, but we did start a few minutes late, so while I have you, I wouldn't mind maybe picking your brain for like if anything this complex can be boiled down to maybe one sentence or two. What would be your advice to the people that are listening right now of how do you keep your business moving forward?
Right.
We're touching on a lot of things, but yeah, Bruce, jump on in.
I was hoping that you'd ask that question, because everybody on this call, we need to support the local economy in the state of Massachusetts. We had the most vibrant economy in the entire United States before this, the lowest unemployment rate, and we all know now it's one of the highest in the country, and we are all struggling in certain ways, some more than others. Every time you need a product, every time you need a service, look to a company in Massachusetts to provide that. It really will help all of us on this call. And I just, that's the message that I would like to get out, and I was hoping I'd have an opportunity to say that.
Yes. Lynn, who's the word local was in the name of your company for a long time. So maybe you want to offer a follow-up to Bruce's thought?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I would say community is everything. Why I chose to put my business literally in downtown, where essentially there's nothing open around me right now. Or feeling that, not having any walkability. So I absolutely would echo Bruce's thought process of supporting local, whether it was Let Us Be Local and now Maker Domain. It's all businesses alike, and that coincides with relationship building and people in general. Is that I tend to always say, my boyfriend knows a guy. He knows a guy who does refrigeration. He knows a guy who does HVAC. He knows a guy that's an electrician. He knows a guy that's can find PPP. He knows a guy. There's literally, because of the relationships you built, it is vital that you continue to strengthen those relationships with your customers and with individuals all around you, right in your own neighborhood. Everyone needs that. We need a little bit of kindness, a lot of kindness in the world right now, and that's the easiest way to help.
And then, Jim, I know we got about 1 minute here, so what's your 30-second advice on keeping business moving forward?
I mean, I think that, you know, Bruce and Lynn hit the nail on the head. We absolutely have to think about our local economies and the impact that the pandemic has had on them. And, you know, I know for Old Sturbridge Village, that's critical. And we've been trying to partner with some of our local businesses, not just here in Sturbridge, but in the region, to make sure that everybody moves forward. The only other thing I would add to that is I would just urge everybody to be quick and nimble. You know, that has been our mantra since this crisis began. You know, as we've talked about, we don't know where it's headed. We don't know what the future necessarily holds for us. But I think our ability to adapt quickly and to try new things is going to keep businesses going in the future. So I would just encourage our colleagues who are listening today or watching to embrace moving fast and moving swiftly and flexibly to change, to adapt to the circumstances, because I think that's helped the village get where it is. And we have our staff to credit for that. I mean, I think to Lynn's point, you know, really taking care of people fueled them to come back in the summer and try new things that were uncomfortable for them, try new things that they weren't used to. But they felt that they were part of the organization. They felt that they had been well cared for during the first phase of the pandemic. And I think they felt like they wanted to keep winning. So I would encourage people to do that too.
All right, and then Anthony, you get the final word here. What's your 2-sentence advice to business?
Keep moving forward. You know, a lot of businesses are going out, and I think it's so important for us to find ways to serve our community and to pivot and to find those new resources and keep moving forward. I think so many people don't let COVID get the best of us. Like Lynn said, 4:30, it's going to get dark out pretty soon. Don't give up. Keep pushing forward and keep on working. Don't let COVID get the best of us, and just find new ways to deliver, you know, your product or your services or whatever it may be. But you have to keep on working. We can't let COVID get the best of us. Keep pushing forward.
All right. So once again, a big thank you to Lynn, Anthony, Jim, Bruce for your participation. And of course, special thanks to our sponsor, Middlesex Savings Bank, for, again, their sponsorship of today's webcast. As we mentioned at the start of the webcast, everyone will receive an email with a link to today's recording, a recording of today's webcast. So everyone, thank you again for joining us, and enjoy a great rest of your day.